Hey guys, welcome back to the show. I'm super stoked about today's episode. It is fundamentally about energy. I am speaking with Jim Girard, the science guy, and Jim Law, the business guy, who are the inventor and CEO, respectively, of a company called BioCharger. If you've ever been to one of the large biohacking conferences, you may have noticed groups of people sitting around a large glass bell-shaped structure that kind of seems to be filled with electrical current. It's kind of glowing. It's really cool. You get a bunch of people sitting around this thing. And I can tell you the one thing they're not doing is being on their phone. We're going to talk about that in the episode, actually. But this is a biocharger. And according to my guess, and there are thousands of customers, this device holds the key to restoring energy pathways in our bodies in a way that can help heal us and help us to live longer, healthier, and happier lives. In many ways, what BioCharger does is it brings nature back to us in a way that we've lost for a long time. And this work actually goes back to the 20s and 30s and is based on the work of Nikola Tesla. And as a matter of fact, Jim Girard, the science guy, lived and studied with one of Nikola Tesla's students for months to kind of learn about this technology. And then he went on and invented this biocharger. Anyway, it's really, really fascinating stuff. I've sat around a biocharger a few times, and I got to tell you, you definitely feel a charge from it. But in any event, we're not saying that the biocharger heals you, because that's not allowed. And besides, nothing can really heal you. But what it does is it restores your body's ability to heal itself at a cellular level using 4 modalities harnessed from nature: voltage, frequency and harmonics, light, and PEMF. And we're going to talk about how this technology, which is based on technology from the 20s and 30s, has helped people to recover their bone density. It helps them to overcome parasitic infections. It helps Jim, the business guy, get over 50% of his sleep as deep sleep. I mean, that's amazing. There are over 1,200 recipes for this thing. So we're going to talk about a lot of these different aspects of the technology and why it's so powerful. But what it comes down to at the very end is how are we able to help the body to restore proper cellular function? And we all know that if we can get ourselves working properly, accepting nutrients and getting rid of trash, then we're way ahead of the game. So definitely make sure to stick around till the end of this episode, because not only do we have a great discount for the listeners of this podcast. All right, spoiler alert, it's not 500, and 500 is your big hint. It's a big discount, but we also have a way for you to try the biocharger for yourself. So definitely, this is a really fun episode. I always love having 2 guests on. It makes for such a dynamic conversation. I hope that you guys agree. Now, you know what to do. If you well, definitely, first of all, to find BioCharger, you go to biocharger.com. That's their website. There's lots of great information there. And you can also follow them on Instagram at biocharger_NG. And they've got a great Instagram account. They have a YouTube account, a Facebook page, the whole 9 yards. Their Facebook page is great because that's where all the users kind of come together and exchange stories and support each other. So that's BioCharger. And remember that discount if you're going to take the leap and you've got a room for your BioCharger, you're going to want to use discount code NAT500. You will become the most popular person on your block. I promise you, this thing is amazing. It's kind of like sitting around the fire with your friends. It's really, really quite an experience. Anyway, if you're looking to connect with me, you know you can find me at natnidham.com. And you know that also you can join my membership community on Mighty Networks, which is the BSP community. We do amazing stuff in there. We do live Q&As. We have monthly deep dives on peptides and other biohacking modalities. We also have guests come in, do live Q&As. We have great conversation. It's intimate and yet big enough to be really an amazing community. And of course, if you join as an annual member, you get my peptide crash course included as part of your membership. Now, if membership communities are not your thing, but you still want that peptide crash course, make sure to go to my website, natnidham.com, and sign up for my newsletter, because that's when I'll be announcing the peptide crash course relaunch in the next couple of weeks that you can buy. on its own without the membership community. So there's that. And of course, if you get benefit and you enjoy this podcast, please make sure to share it out with your friends and networks and to leave us a review, because it's those reviews that help us float to the top of the heap and reach more people. Let's get into the episode. Enjoy. Hey folks, just a quick reminder that all of the information presented in this podcast is for information purposes only. No medical advice, no diagnosing, no treatments suggested here. Before you try anything that you hear about or learn about here, make sure that you check with your medical provider. Welcome back to the show, guys. My guests today, well, as you know from the intro, my guests today are these incredible guys that I had the pleasure of meeting at the Upgrade Labs conference. Welcome to the show, Jim Law and JG, who are the two Jims from BioCharger. So Jim Law, why don't you start and say hello, and then JG can say hello next, and people can identify your voices.
Hi, Natalie and your audience. We're excited to be here today.
Hi, Natalie. Nice to meet you. Looking forward to the podcast.
Likewise. Okay, so the second voice was JG, and we'll just identify. So again, to remind you guys, JG is the original inventor of the BioCharger, and he heads up research and testing and development for BioCharger. And then Jim Law is the guy, that first voice that you heard. He's the co-founder and the CEO of BioCharger. So as they were explaining to me, JG would be the artist in the house, and Jim, I guess are you the entrepreneur or the operator, or both?
Sometimes I wear both hats, but I prefer entrepreneur.
Okay, cool. Entrepreneur. So welcome. I'm so excited about this conversation because I had the pleasure, well, I guess it was maybe for the first or second time to experience BioCharger at the Upgrade Labs conference. And experience, I think, is the perfect word for this device, because it is unlike anything really that people in either new to the space or even who've been in this space. It's a very unique experience to sit around a BioCharger with other people. So I don't know who wants to start here. Maybe we ask JG to start with how this beautiful piece of equipment came to be, and where does it come from, and how did you ever get to a place where you envisioned this and created it?
Sure. So for me, my journey began around 1986, 1987, started coming down with alopecia. So had a landscaping company, started having hair falling out, started looking at my diet, started looking at my environment. And at the same time, I had this landscaping company thinking that, well, maybe it was the fertilizers. So I went to an organic farm convention to look into organic fertilizers. And that's where I first learned about the inventor Nikola Tesla, not the car guy, but the inventor guy from 1860s and 1940s. And as I started to learn more about Tesla and his work, I began to experiment. So it first became as a curiosity, and started to read as much as I could, and started building my Tesla coils and stuff. And then about a year later, I read a book, The Secret of Life by George Lahosky, and another, a guy named Barry Lyons, The Cancer Cure at Work, about another guy named Royal Wright. So started learning about some of this old technology back in the 20s and 30s, and it really fascinated me. And as I started to peel back the onion, I started to see more of this, this technology was really being used quite effectively back in the early 1900s. I was at Purdue University and actually came across a handbook, the electrical therapy handbook, and there were over 2,000 pages of different devices that were out there. And it really got me curious about everything, and started to build some devices based off of these original works. And some of the stories and folklores that went along with this, and the 25 to 30,000 practitioners that were using it in the United States alone at the turn of last century, really got me piqued my curiosity. So began building, experimenting, having friends come by, using it. Moved out to Montana, where it was a really progressive area. Some of them knew about Nikola Tesla and some of these other inventors, and they were really open to trying this device out. So pretty soon I started having people come by using the BioCharger, or that version of it, and piqued a lot of interest. It's to such a point that people were getting really good results and started to coax me into making some systems for them. So in 1993, I started selling my first version of the BioCharger, and not to my surprise, but started to see some of the results that I was seeing was, very consistent with what I was reading back in the early 1900s. So, this became a passion for me, and started to build from it. And as a result, learning about different devices and things like that, wanted to incorporate other ideas and develop what I would consider the earlier version of the BioCharger, where we incorporated the lights and the electric fields and magnetic fields, and just trying to understand what is working, what's not working, and started to develop it. And over the probably 15, 20 years, I was the one-man band. I was making it, selling it, the whole 9 yards. And 2012, I've known Jim Law for a number of years through our sons. So our sons were really good friends growing up, and they'd seen some of the experiments and stuff. I was at the guy just loved to experiment. I was building and doing all sorts of different things, from hydrogen to electrostatics. I mean, all sorts of different experiments that they saw. They just loved to come by the house and see what my next new project I was working on. And Jim was curious about it because he was hearing some of these folklores, stories about me, and he was just coming out of a business that he was very successful at, and was looking for the next opportunity, and was asking me a little bit more about it, and started sharing them about some of the things that I was doing. And he was curious about it, so he met a number of different people that were using my BioCharger, and heard these great stories and results as a result of it, and thought that this is something that he could really help me on the path with, and we partnered up. So
amazing. Amazing. Sorry, go ahead.
It was kind of serendipitous how we did wind up connecting, and Jim left out a couple of key things, I think, in his background. One is that he was so fascinated with Tesla that he found one of Tesla's proteges, basically, and who was in his 80s at the time, and went and lived with him for several months to understand the work that was done behind that. And then he spent a number of months, I think it's at Princeton, what was it,
Purdue University,
at Purdue, studying all the original work of Tesla. And then so when he dug into something, he really did. And the second thing is our sons, as you mentioned, are best friends, and we're out in a resort community where, after Labor Day, they used to say, just turn the lights out when you leave. Yeah. But there is a small community, and people know each other. And I would just hear these stories of, we went over to Mr. Girard's house, and he had this 10-foot spark shooting out, just different things. The hydrogen bomb that he, not bomb, but rocket that he made was and I kept hearing, I'm like, I'm gonna meet this guy.
No kidding.
Never with an intent of being in business with him.
Right.
And it's kind of funny. I mean, imagine, we've all seen Back to the Future, right? Mm-hmm. He is Doc, and this BioCharger was a flux capacitor.
Yeah.
So when Jim and I connected finally, to just say, hey, what is this thing? Tell me more about it. I was fascinated, but I didn't even know this world of woo-woo existed. I was more, my background was more high technology. I worked for a number of years at Apple Computer, had the good fortune to work with Steve Jobs. And when he departed Apple and started Next Computer, for those of us that remember back in that day, I went over there with him and had a chance to really learn, some of his principles. And and had built a couple of companies that had worked out to be very successful, where we would essentially go in and take something that was already being done and find a better way to use it, leveraging new technology. So kind of marrying legacy technology into leading edge technology. And that worked out really well. The last venture I sold with my partners to Siemens back in 2010. And after a year or two of fishing and golfing, I like, I got to do something. Idle time is the devil's playground, right? But when Jim and I started having a serious conversation, I learned things that I had no idea. And one of them was just about kind of the state of our American health. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've been very fortunate. I grew up on a farm, spent all our time outdoors. You've heard the story before. And I, fortunately have been very healthy, and my family's been very healthy, but I had no idea that, and this is, 2016 timeframe that, we kind of started the journey before then, but, it was 4 in 10 American adults had at least one form of chronic disease.
Yeah. And then now.
Yeah. And now in 2022, it's 6 in 10.
Yeah.
So it's like, wow. And when I would talk to Jim about this, he would say, well, it's easy. We're blocked from nature.
Yeah.
And there's energies that all exist in nature. And that was kind of, even back in the early 20th century, people in different parts of the world were becoming ill and nobody could explain it. And vegetation didn't grow as well. And a lot of it was the right Earth's natural fields. The PEMF fields were not as strong in certain areas. And so this was all way above my head. But at the end of the day, it was really clear. And then a study was produced by the EPA that showed that on average, we spend 93% of our time indoors.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so it became really compelling to say, all right, so this BioCharger, is essentially able to replicate and amplify those energy types. And Jim had, we've all heard of red light therapy, which is one of the 4 key energies in nature. We've heard of, obviously PEMF, microcurrent, TENS, different things with voltage, and now more than ever, things with frequencies and harmonics. And it was Jim's brilliance that allowed him to, in an analog way, an entirely analog way, to combine the 4 energy sources, all of which had different devices that could do 1 or maybe 2, but to combine it all into one platform.
Yeah. Well, sorry to interrupt you, but
yeah.
So I actually want to now stop us all and really get into what is the BioCharger, because anybody who's listening to this podcast who's never heard of a BioCharger before is sitting there scratching their heads going, all right, fine. Now I get why, but what is it? What are we doing here? And so, Jim, you just mentioned the 4 elements: light, frequency and harmonics, voltage, and PMF. And these are central to what the BioCharger literally brings to the table, or brings to the room, if you will. And so if I could ask either or both of you to kind of give us a little bit of understanding around those 4 elements, how they're present in nature, because to your point, not only do we not spend time not only do people not leave their homes, but then when they leave their homes, they're sitting in a car, they're sitting in an office, they're sitting in a mall, they're sitting in a school. And there's this concept, like I used to work for an NGO. And one of the things they were talking about was nature deficit disorder, which is a condition that they were talking about that affects children. And so we have all these kids that are suffering from ADD, ADHD, and anxiety and depression, and people are throwing drugs at them. And nobody's kind of cluing into the fact that, wait, if you actually allowed your child to, or gave your child the opportunity to go out and sit in a green space, and there's studies that document, that show that people's stress levels decline when they go out and walk in a nature trail or go into the woods. And so I would love it if we could explain where BioCharger fits into this and how it harnesses that that those elements of nature that we just, in some cases, just can't even get in touch with anymore, and brings them to us. So that was a really long blah, but
no, it was really good. And it brings it back to the point. And I'm going to have Jim go through, nobody does it better than him in terms of just understanding this stuff and mechanisms of action. But just to take it one step further, not only are we, most of us, the buildings and structures we're in, not to mention our vehicles, are, steel structures, rebar, so we're literally blocked from the natural sources of energy while simultaneously being surrounded by man-made energies that, we won't debate, but we can all agree that those were not what Mother Nature intended for our bodies to use as an energy source.
Exactly. I think the whole discussion around 5G, it's a hot topic and it's controversial. But to your point, there's no doubt that the state of nature and people's health, whether it's bumblebees or animals or our health, is incomparable to where it was, let's say, 100 years ago. And you'd have to be a little foolish to not believe that there's something in the environment and there's a lot of things in the environment that are at the very least interfering with how our bodies need to be functioning. So on that note, let it rip, JG.
Sit back now. Hang on to your hat.
So our first source of this natural energy is lightning discharge. So most people don't realize that we have 100 lightning strikes on the planet every single second. Each one is generating hundreds of thousands of harmonics that span AM, FM, shortwave, longwave, UHF, VHF, microwave, millimeter, all the way up to visible light. Now you have every other planet that's doing the same thing. They're generating within their atmosphere these lightning discharge that contribute to this wide ranges of frequencies and harmonics. We have the sun, what we call solar flares or solar storms, are nothing but atmospheric discharges in and around the sun that generate these wide ranges of frequencies and harmonics that contribute to what we call cosmic rays. Now, these are very vital parts of our life. These cosmic rays actually have a direct effect on our health. There was a study that was done at Max Planck Institute in the 70s and 80s where they were investigating this very effect, where they actually had two buildings. One was fully shielded where it was blocking that. So it was only while they were sleeping. It wasn't like they were in the buildings 24 hours a day. And then they had another one that wasn't. And they would move them back and forth. They would notice physiological effects almost immediately after being blocked of this natural energy. As I started to do more research, I found, back in the 1860s, they started to look at these cosmic rays and measure these cosmic rays. And over time, they started to see that they fluctuated. So cosmic rays isn't this constant event, but it's varying depending on, the position of our Earth as it relates to the rest of the universe and how that contributes to this cosmic rays that's being bombarded towards us. And so we'll have these fluctuations where there's more of it and there's fluctuations where there's less of it. And when you look at this over time, you would actually see that in the days, the time when we were exposed to more of it, more cosmic rays or more of these frequencies and harmonics, there were better crops, there were less disease, there was less stillbirths, there were less deaths. And then, when there were less of it, we would see more of it. So there was definitely this direct correlation of what we were being exposed to outside versus inside.
I have a question for you before you go on. In the Max Planck study, what were the changes they observed in people who were in the shielded environment? Was it like disrupted sleep and circadian rhythm, or? Exactly.
Those are the main things they were seeing almost immediately, is the circadian rhythm, their sleep patterns, even like heart rate, blood pressure, things like that were starting to have an effect on it. There were many things that they were seeing that were having a different effect in a very short order with this. And when you're in buildings that have rebar and things like that, they literally block us from those natural energies.
Mm-hmm. Okay, sorry about that. I was like, wow.
Sure.
Keep going.
Great question. And then, not only is it those frequencies and harmonics, but there's that voltage associated with the lightning discharges. It's also contributed to this voltage that we actually can measure in the air. So as you get further away from the Earth, you actually measure these higher voltage potentials, and these voltages vary, on many different facets, in and around the cosmic rays and things like that. But there's also this PEMF side of it, the magnetic field of the Earth itself. So the Earth itself is generating, it's like this electrodynamo that's generating these, very strong magnetic fields that, drive our compasses and our GPS systems and things like that, while we're outside and we're barefoot, we're more exposed to it than when we're inside and, concrete underneath our feet and things like that are elevated. We're not getting those strong PEMF fields, but there's also a natural light component, so not just that sunlight, but there's this natural light, what I consider the blue in the sky. So, one of the most common questions children ask their parents that they erroneously answer is, what causes that blue in the sky? Some of them may say, well, it's the reflection of the water because the Earth is mostly water, but it's actually all these gases in the atmosphere that get excited to fluorescent and releases photons of light, literally thousands of different wavelengths of photons in the infrared, far infrared, visible light spectrum. And all these things are very vital, when we're spending our time indoors, and when you consider, before the advent of the light bulb, we spent the majority of our time out in the fields, whether it's growing our crops or, chopping wood to, create our heat in the wintertime or whatever it is. We spent, we woke up at sunrise, we spent out most of our days outside during the day, and we went to bed at sunset. And in the last 150 years, 200 years, we're spending more time in bed after sunset. We spend most of our time indoors while we're working. And then at night, when we go to bed, we're going to bed many hours after sunset. So, this whole idea of being outside and being exposed to this nature has really had a direct effect on our health. And that's one of the things that I identified once I started delving into it that we're really missing. And what was really neat was the way in which the Tesla coil works and the way in which we generate our variable frequencies and harmonics. We found that we could actually mimic this natural energy that we're actually missing to help replace what we're missing. So how does all this interaction, with these different fields have a direct effect on our health? Identifying these 4 different energy types, you have the variable frequencies and harmonics, we have the magnetic fields and electric fields. How do all these things interact on our body, and how does it affect it? That was the next thing I started to look into, and identifying the different effects on each one of them. So the electric field has a different effect on our bodies than the other ones, and primarily what it does is it helps to make that cell membrane more permeable.
Right.
So the idea, I like to go back to healthy cellular function. So back, basic biology 101, where you're looking at cell function. In cell function, you have these positive, negative charges surrounding the cell membrane. These positive, negative charges trigger ion channels. These ion channels could be the sodium potassium pump, or ATP, which is our cell's battery. It could be uptaking hormones, proteins, nutrients. At the same time, there's the detoxification effect of the fermentation of the cell. So as the cell goes through its work cycle, it's generating oxidative stress that it actually has to deal with. And when the cell becomes less healthy, it's not enough of a charge to trigger these ion channels. So it's been proven you can take external electric fields to help trigger these healthy cellular functions. It stresses the cell membrane to make it more permeable, to help it uptake the nutrients, help it trigger the ATP, helps it to detoxify. Now, the magnetic fields that we're also producing work a little bit differently than the electric fields. So the electric fields makes that cell membrane more permeable. The magnetic fields work with those ion charges. So we have these ion charges that are moving in and around the body, and these ion charges can be delivered through food and air or whatever it is, it's generating the ion charges within our body. As it's moving around in the presence of an electric or magnetic field, it actually generates an electric charge, much like a generator. So you have a generator, and you have a magnetic field, and you move wires through it, it picks up an electric charge. Similarly, with the magnetic fields, and you have these ion charges moving around the body, they pick up that electric charge, to again trigger the ion, ion channels, because you have more of that charge to trigger it. So they sort of work in a similar way, but a little bit differently. So the magnetic field works with the ion charges as they're moving around to increase the charge potential around the cell membrane. The electric field works with the cell membrane itself to make it more permeable. But they're both the inherent, the end function is they help you uptake nutrients, they help you detoxify, and they help you make new cells better.
Yeah. So cellular health, top of the list.
Cellular health, cellular function.
And kind of the, you can tell, I'll go at a much higher level than that for the few in your audience that didn't completely follow all of that. And it's that, the only way our body can heal, recover, repair itself is through regeneration, making new cells that work. And we're doing that at a rate of 2 to 3 million cells per second, even while we're just sitting here now.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you're familiar with, and your audience is familiar with the work of Dr. Jerry Tennant, and perhaps his book, Voltage, Healing is Voltage.
Yeah.
And he's done a lot of work, but he studied roughly 80 chronic diseases and found they all had one common characteristic, and as Jim alluded to, inadequate cellular voltage. And without proper voltage, the two primary functions of healthy cells are uptake of nutrients and dealing with toxicity. And those diminish with the lower the voltage. So when you say, okay, the only way my body can heal is regeneration, what's the key to making perfect new cells? Well, we know that energy is the missing link in many of our cases. As you pointed out, diet and exercise, are essential, but are essentially, not helping without the proper energy.
Well, I take it a step further. Even a lot of the supplements and a lot of the biohacking things that people do. I mean, so many of the biohacking strategies and the technology is about this, right? It's all about seeking to restore, whether they talk about it or not, is can we restore a cell's ability to uptake nutrients, get rid of waste products, and deal with the reactive oxygen species and make enough ATP, like, taking it beyond the cell down to the mitochondria. Mitochondria has a membrane as well. Like it all comes down to these ridiculously small units in our system that, I even say to people who are very ill, not to diminish their illness in the least, but even the sickest person who is sitting and walking and talking and breathing, their body is still a miracle. Mm-hmm. Like the number of chemical processes, reactions, and all of the stuff that's happening that allows them to still draw breath and function at any level is still jaw-droppingly incredible, right? So then, being able to elevate a system now that is healthy to that place where it can restore itself is really what you're talking about is if even a sick person can function, then how do we optimize the cells so that the healthy person functions better, kind of thing.
Yeah. And especially with, all the toxins in our environment, some we can see, some we can't. And, our bodies are being challenged more than ever with all of these external factors as well.
Agreed. All right. So thank you for that.
So there's a third component now, is that vibration. So not only is our cells electric and magnetic, but there's a vibrational component to it. Atoms vibrate at the speed of light. There's the physicists started outlining this back in the 20s and 30s, and they were looking at the what they call the molecular band spectrum. So molecules all vibrate within a certain spectrum. It's with the infrared, far infrared, near infrared, visible light spectrum. So we have a lot of these devices that are popping up that are using infrared or far infrared. The reason why they're working so well is because they're literally vibrating on a molecular level. So what do I mean by that vibration? It's similar to like two tuning forks of the same pitch. So if you've ever seen a music class where they have two tuning forks and they have the same pitch, if you strike one through sympathetic vibration, the other one will just vibrate on its own. It has to be the same frequency. If you take another one, it's a different frequency, you strike it, nothing happens. But because of their there's a sympathetic vibration that occurs because they're vibrating at the same frequencies. So part of the reason why these devices work with the infrared, far infrared is because they're literally vibrating on a molecular level. Below that, there's what they call the magnetic resonance spectrum. So if you've ever had an MRI, the magnetic resonance, it's because in the nucleus of every single cell, there's a vibration. This vibration is a result of these two strong attractive forces that are within the nucleus of the cell. Creates this vibration. That vibration goes from low kilohertz up to that 20 gigahertz, which is where the molecular band spectrum. So all cells are vibrating within that spectrum. So what we're doing with the BioCharger is we're producing these wide ranges of frequencies and harmonics that span that magnetic resonance spectrum as well as the molecular band spectrum, where we can now add energy to the cell through vibration, which is a little bit different than using magnetic fields and electric fields, which is what we get when we go outside. And when you look at it on a cellular level, they're like these one band radio receivers tuned to specific frequencies. And if you generate the right radio station, you can transfer energy into it, much like if I have my car radio station at 95.1, I'm literally vibrating the antenna at 95 megahertz, and I have a receiving antenna that picks up that vibration, and it picks up that energy and gives that voice and what we hear on the radio. But at a cellular level, it's looking for that radio receiver. It's looking for that radio station. And what we're doing with the BioChargers, we're literally generating hundreds of thousands of these radio stations that span that whole spectrum, that we begin to affect things on the magnetic resonance spectrum as well as the molecular band spectrum to, again, add energy into the system to make it work better. And then finally, we have that visible light component. So it isn't just about the below visible light, but that visible light part that has a direct effect on our health. It helps with the vitamin D intake. It helps you with mitochondrial function. We see all these different, perceived benefits with, whether it's mental health, they're using it for seasonal affective disorder, depression, things like that, with the light that has a different effect. But again, adding energy throughout that whole electromagnetic spectrum that includes visible light has a direct effect on our energies, our cells' energy levels that improve these healthy cellular functions.
I love that. So it's interesting to me that, it sounds a little bit like the BioCharger brings together a lot of different technologies together. And so, a lot of people will say, yeah, BioCharger, that's really awesome. But like the price point is, it's a hefty price point for most consumers to get their heads around. And yet, as I'm listening to it, I'm like, oh yeah, there's that device, there's that device, there's this device. There's probably an argument to be made that says that this BioCharger device actually brings together a lot of different technologies into one place. And not that I'm sitting here trying to pitch it or anything, but I'm just kind of trying to get my head around all of the things that it does. Because usually, and I'm going to ask you this question, like with PEMF, with pulse electromagnetic frequencies, usually the way people access it is by lying on a mat or a chair or something. So they have as much of their body as possible in contact with a surface that is delivering these PEMFs to their bodies. And yet with the BioCharger, the last thing you want to do is touch the BioCharger while it's running. And I actually didn't even touch the BioCharger. I touched someone's watch who was in front of the BioCharger with me, and that was a shocking experience. I think you were there, Jim.
I was. I enjoyed that.
I think I jumped off my chair.
You got a little more energy than you bargained for.
Yeah. So, but to go back to that, how does a BioCharger deliver that PEMF dosage to the body without actually having any connection to a device or a mat?
That's a great question. So I mentioned earlier that, back in the day, I worked with Steve Jobs, and one of the things that was, ingrained in his DNA was always forget about the technology, begin with the end user experience in mind. So, what Jim was able to accomplish, all in a very analog way, we said, look, this isn't commercially viable, but let's capture what it's doing and let's try and use the right technology. And while we're at it, let's find a way to make this far beyond. So not only do we want to stack these technologies together, but we want to make an incredible end user experience. And most of us are seeing, you go to Restore and you get in the Juve room and you're standing between two very hot panels of light. It's not fun. You're naked. You're looking at your watch. How long is this going to? And we're like, that's not the ideal experience, for folks. And with PEMF, there's some great systems out there. There's no question PEMF has probably the most efficacy in medical studies, clinical research. But, if you've ever seen a fish flopping around, out of water, that sometimes you get that effect from those because you're on a mat and they're having to crank it up enough to get it permeable.
Yeah.
And so our idea was, what would it be like to sit next to the BioCharger and be able to generate all of these fields, these 4 energy types, in a high enough concentration that instead of a physical contact, that we can actually bathe your body with these energies. They don't like me to use bathe, radiate this energy so that your body can absorb it. And then we thought, if we could do that, then why not let it happen for more than one person?
Well, it's like sitting around a fire. Yeah.
Yeah. And so how do we make this more communal?
Yeah.
And that's really, so there's 3 things that are very unique about the BioCharger that most people say, when they compare, the BioCharger to any 2 of devices that do the subset of what we do, we're generally less expensive. I mean, we're talking about a $16,000-$17,000 investment.
Yeah.
But more importantly, we've got a lot of businesses out there that will provide sessions for a very affordable price. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But one of the keys to our success has been being able to produce high enough concentration of those 4 energy types so that you're getting the same or a better effect than any of the individual modalities. So we're used to, when you do an all-in-one, you don't get the best of class in any 4. And the way that Jim designed the BioCharger and that we were able to move forward and make it a platform by creating a cloud infrastructure that allows us to, and our intellectual properties all around the way we can control specific frequencies and energies in a way that concentrate on not just overall health and wellness, but pinpoint certain health challenges or health objectives. And we call them recipes. We're not a medical device, but they're frequency and energy programs designed for specific outcomes. So, people that go to OsteoStrong, for example, that are helping, trying to improve their bone density because they might have osteopenia or osteoporosis, they use they use recipes that help complement that technique that's being used there that increases bone. People in health and wellness centers are using them to help reduce inflammation and strengthen the immune system, target different conditions, things like that. So it's almost limitless. And that's part of the magic of it, is that we've created a platform that researchers and practitioners around the world can actually contribute and experiment with. And collectively, we've now got over 1,200 different recipes that are available to our entire base around the world. So, and it continues to grow. So, we stack all 4 energy types. There's no other platform that does that. B, we do it in a way that you can sit comfortably with yourself and others, your family, coworkers. We have meetings around it. It's a big corporate wellness tool now. Members and owners of businesses that serve patients, members, or clients have a way to bring community together, and people really associate with that. Like you said, the modern day campfire.
Yeah.
And then having it be a platform that continues to evolve so that no customer left behind. We're able to continue to and develop new, and you think after 1,200, you'd think of something, it'd be hard to find something that we don't have a recipe for, but those come up, and all of them are steeped in research. We have the backup validation for each of those, but all that to say that at the end of the day, a $350 a month payment to somebody that's spending $200 a month on supplements. If if you kind of got one of Tony Robbins, and by the way, I will take this a quick little advertisement. You're a big fan of Dave Asprey, and he's done incredible things, and he's a godfather of biohacking. Dave just did an unboxing video of his second BioCharger in his new home in Austin that you can see on his social media if you go look at that. That is his go-to platform, and he can have anything, has a lot of different devices. Same thing with Ben Greenfield.
Yeah.
That's his number one go-to. If he had to put all of them away, and I've watched people say, look, I don't have 20 hours a day to do everything you do. If I could only do one, what would it be? And he, but Tony Robbins and he is an intense individual, but watching the transformation and, people that have had significant health challenges that have been able to overcome them miraculously when the BioCharger comes on the scene have been part of the reason why, it's become adopted and it stays adopted. I mean, Dave got his 3 years ago. Tony got his over 4 years ago. There's, they use them every single day.
Yeah.
And then all the rest of the world as well. But it's quite different. It's unique.
Yeah, no kidding. So just trying to, again, like bring it back to, like I said to you, I'm coming in here like with a bit of a beginner's mind, trying to channel the questions that people might have. And JG, you were talking about before how cells resonate, like the resonance. So the different recipes. So I would imagine that different tissues, different organs in the body are going to have different vibrations. And is that essentially part of what the different recipes are tuning into? Like if I want to build bone, I'm going to the I don't remember what they're called. I don't know if it's a recipe. The recipe from the BioCharger that they may be using at OsteoStrong is really going to create that resonance that the cells in the bone need to optimize and to be functional again. And am I getting that right, or am I kind of off?
Exactly right. Recipes also control the magnetic field, the electric field, to an extent the light.
Yeah.
But the primary difference is really those frequencies and harmonics generated. So,
right. So it delivers to that specific tissue through the frequency.
Exactly. So we could, so when we looked into the history with the physics and things like that, where, physics have already outlined the whole magnetic resonance spectrum. I mean, one of the things that, although that, we sort of got away from in the 30s and 40s, the therapeutic benefits of it, we continued to move forward with at least the diagnostic side of it. So PET scans, MRIs, things like that, they're based off of understanding these vibrations, and they've outlined all that. Same thing, the molecular band spectrum, they've outlined all this stuff. So as you look at it from a physics point of view and identify those, and, we subscribe to different organizations that, look at it, we also apply different ways to the approach. You can also look at the diameter of the cell. So if you look at the diameter, there's a length to that corresponds to a wavelength. So if you produce a frequency at that particular wavelength, that's its absorption rate. So there are many different ways you can attack the recipe to target for specific outcomes, as well as even current research. I mean, now we're become full circle because of the inadequacies of our healthcare system. We're starting to look at new paradigms, which are really old paradigms, and we're starting to look at things in a new light, that they're beginning to identify many of these frequencies effects on different health objectives. So we draw from a source of these information. We vet it, we develop the recipes based off of that, we share the recipes, and not to our surprise, but with our regular feedback, as Jim alluded to, we have almost 3,000 systems worldwide. We get feedback all the time with the results that we're seeing, correspond with the recipes that we created. So there is there's a history that we're seeing that, our recipes produce different results. And really the beauty behind the BioCharger itself and the recipes is each recipe is its own unique design. So they give you different effects with it. So we've had many times where clients will say, wow, I feel this thing completely different. I feel completely different with this recipe versus another one, is because we're targeting specific areas based off of that idea.
Yeah, no, I love that. And so to me, like, because OsteoStrong is the one that I know, and I'll tell you, like, my mom developed osteoporosis bad enough that she was having trouble getting around, right? And so she had so much pain in her hips, probably from the bone degenerating, that she was having trouble walking. Now, my mom, she's in her early 80s, but she still works, and she works full time in retail. And so this goes back, I want to say May of 2021, maybe. And fortunately, she lives in a place in Florida where there's an OsteoStrong not a 5-minute drive away from her.
Beautiful.
And so, my parents have come a long way. They now do what I tell them to do. God bless their pointed little heads. They're adorable. But, I said, you need to join this gym. And I didn't know at the time about the BioCharger at OsteoStrong. But as we're talking about it, the stacking of those benefits, the physical stimulus to the bone delivered by the machines at OsteoStrong, coupled with, like, she does a BioCharger session every single time she walks through that door. So coupled with, now I understand, targeting that bone matrix to get it vibrating at the right level so that it can accept the stimulus, so that, whatever supplements I'm giving her, we often talk about supplements, but how do we know we're getting it to where it needs to go? And it's almost like, it sounds to me almost like with BioCharger, you're creating a destination for this stuff. You're creating an energetic need and acceptance for both the stimulus and the supplementation so that they can all work together and create a desired outcome. In this case, improve bone density. Because I'll just finish off with, a year and a half later, she should be worse. And she's actually so much better. And this tiny little, this tiny little lady in her 80s is pushing more weight than most people could dream of. So
love that. Love that. And you're absolutely right. I mean, when you think about it, there's the physical. So you go into an OsteoStrong and they've developed a technology that in 7 minutes a week, you're basically doing 4 exercises and you're in and out of there in less than 30 minutes. And then you've got the energetic, and, it's kind of, they go together like peas and carrots,
Well, as you explained earlier, if the cell doesn't have the right charge, it's not going to be able to function. Like, it just,
Correct.
If we can't get the cell doing what it needs to do, you can yell at it all you want, and just, it's like, I can't do this.
Yeah. And conversely, we're just making new cells. And if we don't have that energetic piece to it, then, our body, it's going to continue to make new cells. They're just that the health of those cells diminishes, which in turn, our health diminishes along with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, with the uptake of those nutrients, specifically, if you don't have that enough of a charge, even though if I'm taking the nutrients, if I'm not gaining the cell membrane to get it to the nucleus of the cell, you ended up just peeing it all away at the end of the day. You're not really getting it, absorbing it. So the most important part is really being able to absorb it. And, with these fields that we're generating, we're actually able to, create that absorption that allows those nutrients to actually work that much better.
Yeah, no, I love that. And so I'm gathering, like, I'm sitting here thinking about all the things that people are dealing with. And certainly coming out of the last couple of years, there's a couple of doozies, right?
Sure.
We've got systemic inflammation that's like a runaway fire, which is affecting people's ability to function cognitively, never mind physically. And so, again, like, I'm guessing that there are recipes that are specifically targeting that, that kind of chronic fire. Because again, talking about even treatments like stem cells. And so I was just at a health conference recently talking to a couple of these stem cell docs. And the thing that keeps coming up over and over again is, if you don't put out the fire in the body of inflammation before, whether you're taking your stem cells by injection or you're taking a supplement that improves the body's mobilization of stem cells, it's almost like those stem cells are going to get burned up in the inflammation, but more importantly, that constant inflammation is this background noise that prevents the stem cell from being able to find its way to that site of injury that you're trying to repair. And so, can we talk a little bit about BioCharger and inflammation? Because it's such a foundational aspect of everything that we're seeing right now.
Sure. Well, I think a lot of that inflammation is driven by, that detox, the toxicity buildup. And if we're not able to remove those toxins intercellularly, then the cell just sits and ferments and creates more inflammation, and it just compounds the issue here. And the more we begin to exercise our cells to get things to move in and out, whether it's uptaking the nutrients, but just as important, detoxifying, they're dealing with that fermentation of the cell. Those go pretty much hand in hand, and they're both driven together with it. And that's one of the beauties of the biochargers, being able to to work not only dealing with the uptake of the things that we need, but also getting rid of the things that we don't.
Well, sure. And I mean, I think that's where nutrition can almost become toxic, right? You can, if you're taking up a whole bunch of good stuff, but you can't clear the waste.
Yeah.
You're really just building toxicity in the system.
And Natalie, you really touched on one of the three key areas. So we collect a lot of data. We get the usage data from, again, almost 3,000 systems around the world over 4 years. And we get to see, with 1,200 recipes, we get to, see a self-ranking kind of, how it all comes out. And the top three are inflammation support. So that recipe is out of, 1,200 and millions, literally millions of biocharger sessions. That's number two.
Wow.
Number one is immune strong, which builds up the immune system. And number three, I want to make sure I get this right, theta wave. And theta wave is for sleep. Yeah. And most people go, oh, biocharger energy. I want more energy. But it's an amazing tool. And to the point where these different recipes have different effects, we can wake you up and make you feel like you're ready to go and nonstop. Or we can calm you down. And theta wave, I did it last night. I tend to biocharge 3 times a day, but last night before bed, I did 12 minutes. By the way, the average, in case we hadn't gotten this out, the average session is like 12 to 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So who hasn't got 12 to 15 minutes? Especially sitting there, can't use your computer or your phone because it'll,
I was just going to say, off your screen.
Interference. It won't hurt them, but you can't function, which is a good thing, right?
Yeah.
If we just sit without our phone for 10 minutes, we're going to be healthier anyway. But the reality is I did this for 12 minutes, stayed awake. And, I didn't feel a whole lot different when I was done. But when my head hits the pillow, I use an Apple Watch with 2 different apps on it. And I go from about 25% of my sleep, total sleep being deep, restful sleep, to over 50%. Last night was 54%.
Wow.
And I don't need a wearable. And by the way, we have a 45-day money back guarantee. So anyone who doesn't love it can send it back. That never happens. But I don't need to look at my app on my watch to know how I slept last night. I mean, my eyes pop, I feel better. You get up and look at yourself in the mirror, you just, you're ready to go, and then jump into that cold shower, and off to the races.
Boom. Out of the rocket ship.
Boom, shakalaka. Yeah.
I love it. So I know that there's lines that you can't cross when we're talking on a podcast like this. We're not going to make any medical claims. And yet, as you just mentioned several times, you have a massive body of information, of feedback from all these systems that you have out in the world, and delivering and collecting at the same time, right? There's like this energetic exchange going on, because I would imagine you have a relationship with almost everybody that has one of these things. And I have a good friend who owns a business in Northern Ontario, and I think she owns at least one, if not 2 biochargers. And one of them for sure is in her head office where her entire team can access it. Mm-hmm. So, like you said earlier, there's a corporate piece to this. Like if you can help the people who are on your team to be better and to feel better, then everybody's going to win. But is there a repository of some of this data that's coming back to you that people can access and look at? Is it your website? Is there somewhere else?
There is, so for all of our clients, we have a private Facebook page, and the exchange and the information that's there is invaluable. We're continuing to evolve. We have a lot of data. And so we're able to, and we share that information in a holistic sense so that we can see directionally, and give people advice, on that. Another element of what we do is kind of the support. Not everyone, can just, say, okay, I know what I do, 1,200 recipe, which one's going to be? We walk you through all of that. That's all part of it. And we have health optimization team that you get to share what your health objectives are or your health challenges. And they put together, we call it a recipe plan, to get you going so that you can really dial in, because everyone is very different. And even though those top three, you might say, okay, let's work on inflammation, but, purify and recover. That's number 4, by the way. That's a detoxification recipe. But, somebody with tinnitus, for example, and I'll just give you a quick story.
That's a good one,
actually. Claims, yeah. But we've seen miraculous things happen. But just recently, at an OsteoStrong location, there were 2 members that were doing a parasite recipe because one of them had gotten a high blood cell count. They said sometimes that can be a result of parasites. And so they're doing the parasite recipe, but they were friends. And so this other woman sat down with her during that session. Now she happens to have tinnitus, and which to most people, they know that is your ears are ringing constantly. Within about 5 minutes into the session, she feels a sensation in her ear, and literally a 1-inch long parasite came out of her ear and dropped onto the floor. I can't make this stuff up.
Come on.
And by the way, her tinnitus went away.
Well, no kidding. There wasn't
instantly.
There wasn't something like just smacking her eardrum all day.
Yeah, but there's just stories upon stories, but there is no question that we all have a lot of toxicity, and the ability to just like to get the sleep. Let's say it did nothing better than allow you to double your deep sleep. You know how much healing your body can do when you double your deep sleep, or the detoxification. We're all loaded with stuff we can't help but if you eat sushi, then there's a 90+% chance that you have parasites. It's a way of the world, and this can be quite the elixir for helping with things like that.
Yeah, well, definitely. I remember when I was in nutrition school, learning about parasites, and there was a lecture where they talked about how in Japan they have some of the most aggressive intestinal parasites on the planet, because they will get some real doozies from raw fish.
Yeah.
And I've been I stopped eating sushi for a significant period of time after that lecture. And then when I did go back to it, it's never without a handful of digestive enzymes and HCl and
there you go. You're a better person than I. I just do purify and recovery.
Well, so until I get my BioCharger.
Yeah, there you go.
Until the day I own one, that it's going to have to be my go-to. So let's, I know that we're coming up on time, and I could talk to you two for a very long time, and maybe we'll come back again and do a follow-up episode. But until then, for people who, there's going to be people listening to this who are like, where do I get a piece of it? Or can I try it? So how can people access BioCharger without physically buying one? Having, what was it, a 45-day, you said, money back guarantee is impressive. And still we're going to have people who are going to be like, yeah, okay, maybe I just get a piece of this before I even think about it.
Yeah. So first off, we'd love to offer anyone listening to this in your audience an opportunity to go nearby and try a BioCharger session. And we've set up a landing page on our website. So if you go to biocharger.com/charge card, you can register, and we will arrange for you to go nearby to a BioCharger session, complimentary BioCharger session. And one of the great things, a lot of our clients, we've talked about OsteoStrong quite a bit, and we're in over 100 locations just in the US only, but we've got a lot of other businesses that are offering, other services as well. And what they often do is not only will they invite you in for a BioCharger session, but they'll tell you about their other modalities and things. So it's really a good, a good experience overall, but we'll arrange for that for you. And then secondly, for those that want to take the plunge, now think about it. If you went out to dinner, most of us go out to dinner a couple nights a week, right? If you went out to dinner one night instead of 2 nights a week, you could afford to have a BioCharger.
Yeah, well, especially at these days prices. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, but and probably even less than that. But all seriousness, for those in your audience that want to make the investment in a BioCharger, we have great financing options and things you can learn about on our website. We'll also give an instant rebate of $500 by using a discount code through you that I think we were really creative.
Yeah, well, we kept it short and sweet and simple. We made it NAT 500. Yeah. So kind of sounds like a car race or something.
So not only is Natalie bringing you the latest and greatest information, but she's bringing you a way to save a little bit of money if you decide to invest as well.
I love that. And I think also definitely, I know I've met a bunch of my listeners at different biohacking events. So you guys are always at the best and the greatest of the biohacking events. So that's always, and what's lovely about sitting around the BioCharger at these events is more often than not, for the scale of events that we attend, we end up being in environments that are inherently toxic. And so, and it's funny, it's like people are drawn like flies to a flame kind of at the BioCharger booth, because you're always going to find a group of people sitting around the BioCharger. You always need people there sitting there trying to kind of calm your nervous system down from all the overstimulation and craziness of these events.
Yeah, we love the Upgrade Labs conference. And then the UK, they have the Health Optimization Summit, which we go to. And then we're fortunate enough to go with Tony Robbins at different things. Just in I know you mentioned you're in Florida now, and just up the road a piece in West Palm 3 weeks ago, I think it was. Might have been 4 weeks now. We had a UPW, so Tony's biggest live event, which had, I think, something like 9,000 people there. And we had 8 BioChargers set up and did a BioCharger lounge 17 hours a day. Wow. But exactly what you said, I love and get the analogy of like drawing flies to the light, but it has a better effect than when you draw the flies into the light. But it's the same thing. People would go, wow, what's that? And then they try it, and then they go, oh, I got to go back for that and bring somebody with them. And so within a few hours, we're stacked up like cordwood, but we could have 5 or 6 chairs around each of the BioChargers. So we were able to serve kind of every 15 minutes, something like, 80 people. Something like that. So sure. we were able to now it's less smaller number than that, my math's off, but 50.
Yeah.
And so we just kept running the whole time, but we love that. And then they get a chance to actually, and the same thing with Upgrade, to use it a couple of times. A lot of people feel something the first time they use it, but others are like, oh, I'm not sure what that was, and I'm not sure I felt anything. So to have an opportunity to go to one of these events, which, really open all of our eyes and are great educational opportunities, but to come in and have a chance to do a few sessions is kind of the holy grail.
Yeah, well, one of the women who came to my last retreat, we met at Upgrade Labs for the first time, because the retreat was a couple months later, and she actually bought a BioCharger, and she's like, this is my prized possession.
We're honored. One of the other benefits with that group, in today's society with our healthcare system, everything is so isolated. It's, it's one-on-one with your practitioner. One of the great things about the BioCharger as a group is you get to have that shared experience where you can share what's going on with each other. And I think that that's a really added benefit that goes along with the BioCharger when you do it with those groups, because you can share with each other, some of the things that you're experienced with it to help, address some of the concerns you may have that are out there, as well as to have that shared experience of wow, we are feeling better together. And
Yeah.
I think that that's a really powerful thing, is that community that we're actually created as a group versus that one-on-one, whether you're working out or you're going to the chiropractor, you're going to your doctor, you're always that isolated, that one-on-one person, and you almost feel like alone, whereas this thing is more of that group feeling. And I think that that's one of the things that really what people are attracted to. It's not just that because you saw that light and you're attracted to the light, but it's also that group around that really, I think, brings people together.
Yeah, no, I love that. I mean, and to your point, it's multifactorial. It's an energetic thing as well. So, yeah, well, I'll see you both at a Health Optimization Summit, and
No, super.
I think I'll be there.
Across the pond.
Across the pond. I'll be talking about something that I actually think like it's a supplementation modality that it upgrades the body's ability to generate proteins to rejuvenate tissues, glands, and organs at a cellular level. So imagine, again, marrying these two things together, like providing the signal to the body, but then creating the environment in the system, like preparing the terrain to actually do that work. Then we throw in a few little compounds and make sure all the working material is there, and boom, not only are we living to 120, but we're doing it well, right?
Yeah,
because this is
right.
ultimately the goal. I mean, for the longest time, everybody was about increasing lifespan. Then we woke up one morning and saw all these people who are living a really long time in a really crappy life. And we all kind of went, okay, no, wait. Well, okay, I'll trade you a couple of years for.
Yeah. The only guy that wanted to live to 100 was the guy that was 99.
Exactly. And we've kind of ramped that up to a whole
health span versus lifespan. We gotta try and make the two closer.
Exactly. And I think we're getting there. I think that, with modalities like the BioCharger, we're definitely moving into a space where, and, having this dual access where people can either buy it from themselves, or this is the type of device that lends itself beautifully to a group setting, whether it's a gym or a spa, whatever the case may be.
Corporate, internally.
Corporate. I mean, I think
for your employees.
Yeah, I want to go out and pitch it to a few companies. I'll become your new salesperson. So, gentlemen, obviously the BioCharger has so many different applications. How often should someone use it? And I'm going to guess it varies depending on what they have going on. But what's the minimal effective dose? What's ideal? And so if one of you could take us through that would be amazing.
Sure. So, and obviously, if you have one personally, that's ideal. You have access to one. And, personally, I'll do it 3 times a day, one in the morning to kind of get the day started. I'll do either breath work or meditation or a little bit of gratitude and just kind of build up my energy level. At lunch, in the office here, right after lunch, we have meetings around it where we'll either run mental clarity or pineal mastery, which really gets you creative. And sometimes you never have those dips in the afternoon, and then at dinner or after dinner or in the evening, one called Nirvana, like de-stresses you. My wife and I enjoy that. Or, as I mentioned earlier, theta wave before bed. Mm-hmm. But the minimal use, and so the OsteoStrong program, for instance, is generally people go once a week, and if they're fairly healthy, they'll get a nice boost. They'll sleep a little better. They'll have more energy, and they'll notice it, but it will diminish after a couple of days. Now, if someone comes to me and says, "Look, I've got a health challenge. Mm-hmm. My back, I've got a soft tissue issue or something like that, or some form of chronic condition that didn't just happen overnight." And what I'll say is to set an expectation is 3 to 4 sessions a week. And average sessions, instead of doing 15 minutes, you might do 2 recipes, so 30 minutes.
Yeah.
3 to 4 times a week for 2 weeks. And that's setting an expectation. And I would say about 75+% of the time after the first week, people are saying, "Wow, I notice. I'm feeling the shift. The balance is there," and then sustaining that is, I can say that, look at 3 or 4 days, and if you have a way to do it, every 3 or 4 days, your body's going to love you for it.
Yeah.
But if you can only do it once a week or something, I mean, there's a lot of people that benefit from that. And what I'm really happy about is that there's a lot of affordable options out there. So people can go and get a 10-pack of sessions for, you know, maybe 20, 25 bucks a session on average, something like that. So a lot of the clients, you know, there's some that are higher end, but it's definitely, once you start it, it becomes a lifestyle.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. And, you know, I think when you're dealing with chronic conditions, maybe you start to do the math in a different way. Right.
Yeah,
And
100%.
as you said earlier, you know, if you have financing options and someone's already spending so much money on their health, and this is something that can really move the needle for them, maybe it starts to factor in a different way if they can see their way to do that. So thank you. Yeah. So understanding, but you know, it is amazing that it is something that even at once a week, you can experience benefits.
Oh, sure.
And then it just kind of goes from there. So thank you so much. So gentlemen, why don't we leave our audience? We've shared the discount code is NAT500 if you decide that you want to take the plunge and invest in this for you and your family, because won't just be for you. It'll be you, your family, and people around you. Or there's going to biocharger.com/charge card. So you can find a place where you can get a complimentary session. But beyond that, where can people find you and go to BioCharger and to your website and learn more?
Sure, biocharger.com. Our Instagram is BioChargerNG for next generation. And same thing with LinkedIn and Facebook.
Beautiful. Love it. Thank you so much. Is there anything else we didn't cover? Is there anything, JG, you want to leave us with? Jim, anything?
Just that we really enjoyed this, and I think I'm speaking for Jim when I say the same thing. You have a great way of communicating, and I can see why you have such a big following in your audience. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you. Well,
I really appreciate it.
thank you. And likewise, this has been great. Thanks so much.